So we begin with a praise to Shakyamuni Buddha and the Buddha Dharma Sangha, and then recite one of the most important sutras, teachings given by the Buddha, the Heart Sutra, and then offer a mandala, and then go for refuge and generate bodhicitta. So on page 73. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O Supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, forms supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With a supreme science, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean. To you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path to sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts. To you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all atoms in all aspects. With supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning or cloud. See conditioned things as such. With these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of sickness, aging, and death. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling on Mount Vulture's Mountain, and Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration of the categories of phenomena, called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of apparent nature. Then to the Buddha, power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage, who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of Nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayatam gate gate pada gate pada samgate bodhi swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Adi Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shadavatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. And then we skip a few pages to page 98. Page 98. And then offer that short mandala and the request to turn the wheel of Dharma. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies and the Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to explain the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to explain the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So then generate a positive motivation for engaging in the session. This morning, if you can at least think that may I create causes not only for my own well-being, but for the well-being of other sentient beings as well. And if you can think all other, may I create causes for the well-being of all other sentient beings, not only in this life, but also in future lives from life to life. And not only may I create causes for the well-being of sentient beings like myself and others within samsara, but also may I create a cause to achieve the perfect well-being that is totally liberated, free from samsara, totally beyond the process of birth and death through the force of afflictive emotions and karma. So the peace and happiness of perfect nirvana. And then if you can think as well, may I create causes for not only the happiness of in samsara and that which transcends samsara, nirvana, but also the well-being of full enlightenment for myself and all sentient beings. So on the basis of whatever I do here and now, this session, especially, and everything I do today, especially this session, may that all become a cause for myself and all sentient beings to achieve the state of full enlightenment, which is free from every fault and have perfected every positive quality. So generate positive motivation. So then we can look at the actual text for today, which is this is a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. And we're in chapter 7, verse 15, so that means page 78. Page 78. So this is the chapter on enthusiasm, also called joyous perseverance. So again, page 78, verse 15, so we're starting from. So generally, enthusiasm is one of the 6 bodhisattvas, one of the 6 perfections practiced by bodhisattvas. The first being, so the 6 perfections, the first is generosity, then pure morality, and patience, and then enthusiasm. So enthusiasm is something we need in all of our virtuous actions so that we don't become despondent, become bored, or give up when things are difficult. So we need enthusiasm to kind of keep going, even though we face difficulties, and to remain happy about what we're doing, right? Enthusiastic, and have energy for what we're doing. So let's look at some of the verses. So verse 15 says, having rejected the supreme joy of the sacred Dharma, which is a boundless source of delight, why am I distracted by the causes for pain? Why do I enjoy frivolous amusements and the like? Right. So basically, this is talking about why. So it's asking us. The author is asking himself. So then, by way of giving that as a teaching, he's asking us to ask ourselves, why are we distracted by objects of attachment and things that we know are kind of frivolous and not very meaningful? Like we all are, right? Sometimes distracted, watching just random stuff on YouTube or Facebook, or just when we feel like something troubling us in our mind, instead of actually sitting down and thinking about it in a meaningful way that might bring to some resolution, just distracting ourselves by eating food or watching TV or listening to music or calling up a friend, just distracting ourselves instead of directly addressing the issue. That's not to say any of those things are wrong or bad, but asking ourselves, well, what's really going to be helpful to me in the long run? What's really meaningful to me, or going to help me address different issues I need to address in the long run? And then also just out of attachment, even it's not in response to having a hard time or something, but just out of attachment, being distracted to things that we know are kind of, like just going shopping or going here and there, or when there's actually important things that we need to do, not doing those, but kind of procrastinating and wasting time doing different things. So he says, having rejected the supreme joy of the Dharma, So recognizing that, especially the recognition here is that, well, you can think in terms of impermanence and death, that death is something certain to happen, or death eventually is going to come, without a doubt. It's something certain to happen. The time of death is uncertain. So when we die, there's no certainty at all. It could be today, it could be tomorrow, next week, or a month, or a year, or 2 years away. It's not certain at all when we're going to die. And at the time of death, only Dharma is of help, right? So the idea is that because at the time we die, anything physical, anything material, it's not going to benefit us, because we'll be separated from all of those things. We'll be separated from our body, we'll be separated from our possessions, our wealth, our reputation. We'll even be separated from our loved ones, our friends and family. So none of them can be of ultimate, assistance at that time when we transition from this life into a future life. So at that time, only Dharma is a benefit, right? Because only qualities of our mind, positive qualities of our mind and the control that we have over our mind, wisdom and compassion and so forth, only they are a benefit. So having rejected, not seeing that though, as usually we don't think about that, having rejected the supreme joy of the sacred Dharma, which is a boundless source of delight, right? So if we practice Dharma, we practice generating love, kindness, compassion, generosity, patience, and so forth, positive qualities of the mind, and mental concentration, control, inner qualities, then that's a boundless source of delight. So instead of doing that, instead of practicing Dharma, he asks, why am I distracted by the causes for pain? So here, causes of pain, it doesn't mean like, why am I distracted by, poking myself with a needle, or like, getting sick or something, things that actually causes physical pain. It means things which seem pleasant in the short term, but actually don't give satisfaction in the long term, actually lead to dissatisfaction and more craving. So why am I distracted by those kind of things that don't ultimately give satisfaction? Why am I distracted by the causes of pain? Why do I enjoy frivolous amusements and the like? Like think of like sometimes we have a day free, or we're sick and take off work and stay home and think, oh, I'll just lay on the couch and watch TV, watch movies. Or even sometimes you're flying, flying long distance, and you're in the airplane, you think, oh, now I can watch all these movies I haven't watched in a long time. At first it's kind of nice and it's entertaining, but if you keep doing, after a couple of hours, you feel kind of sick by the end, You watch TV for many hours or watch movies for many hours, then by the end you just feel kind of like yicky and like not well at all. So, or same with eating, Just try to eat some delicious food, but then you eat too much, and then again you don't feel good by then. So why am I distracted by causes of pain? Why do I enjoy frivolous amusements and the like? He's asking. Because these are things that undermine our enthusiasm, undermine Dharma practice. So then in verse 16, it says, without indulging in despondency, I should gather the supports for enthusiasm and earnestly take control of myself, right? Have some self-control. Then by seeing the equality between self and others, I should practice exchanging self for others. Right? So in this verse, he's talking about seeing that the shortcomings and the shortcomings of being caught up with just frivolous objects of attachment, wasting time with meaningless objects of attachment. Rather, I should have some self-control, so without procrastinating, without being despondent, I should gather the supports for enthusiasm. So think, why should I be enthusiastic about spiritual practice or Dharma practice? And earnestly take control of myself, right? Have some self-control, direct myself with wisdom. And then by seeing the equality between self and others. So what's the equality between self and others? It's the fact that our self and all other sentient beings are equal in wanting happiness, wanting well-being, and wanting to be free from suffering, right? And we're all equal in having the potential for happiness up to full enlightenment, and having the potential for the boundless suffering of human and all lower realms. And then he said, in the last line, I should practice exchanging self for others. So this is based on seeing the faults of self-cherishing, of total self-centered, egoistic attitude, and seeing the benefits of being altruistic, of cherishing the well-being of others more than oneself. Then I should practice exchanging my own self-centered, selfish attitude for one that's other-centered, altruistic, and using my life, instead of using my life just to exclusively achieve my own my own ends, my own welfare, my own selfish desires alone. Rather, I should use my life to do whatever I can to benefit others. So in that way, practice exchanging self and others. Actually, there's a lot more instruction that goes in there. But in short, that's what he's talking about. Seeing the faults of self-cherishing, the benefits of cherishing others, and then practice exchanging this self-centered attitude for an altruistic attitude. Because this is talking about the Bodhisattva's way of practicing Dharma. Then verse 17, I should never indulge in despondency by entertaining such thoughts as, how shall I ever awaken? For the Tathagatas who speak what is true have uttered this truth. If they develop the strength of their exertion, even those who are flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects will win the unsurpassable awakening, which is so hard to find. Right, so those two verses, 17 and 18, talk about reversing despondency, or being apathy, reversing apathy, and generating confidence that we have the ability to achieve enlightenment. Right, so in verse 17 is talking about more reversing despondency. I should never indulge in despondency by entertaining such thoughts as, how shall I ever awaken? Right, so sometimes when we're doing any spiritual practice, Buddhist or non-Buddhist, whatever, or anything virtuous, sometimes we can, even in politics or business or in family life, whatever, we can, when we're trying to do something good, especially to do something to benefit others, sometimes it's easy to become hopeless. You don't see much progress, you don't see many people supporting you, many people maybe thinking, oh, that's not realistic, you can never do that. And for different reasons, we might think, this goal I've set out to achieve is just too unreasonable, too unachievable, impractical, right? So then we can become despondent, kind of give up. So of course, when we think in terms of achieving full enlightenment, it's like this incredible long-term goal. It's very hard to see someone that seems like they've achieved that before. It's something that takes many, 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 many lifetimes, and can often seem like it's something completely impossible to abandon every fault. Totally abandon anger, totally abandon laziness, totally abandon mental distraction, abandon all fear, abandon all ignorance, and then develop, omniscience, the mind that knows everything. Develop infinite energy, infinite compassion for every sentient being, no matter how they treat us. Sometimes it seems like something that's impossible, right? So then we can ask so we might kind of, in frustration, ask, how can I ever awaken? Someone like me, especially when we see ourselves so full of faults, oftentimes, so full of doubt, confusion, make mistakes, just feel lazy, then we ask ourselves, how can I ever fully awaken? So he says, but then he says, I should never, so from 17 in the beginning, I should never indulge in despondency by entertaining such thoughts as, how shall I ever awaken? For the Tathagatas who speak what is true, so the Buddhas who only speak what is true, they never speak in a way that's deceptive, or lie, or misrepresent things. So the Tathagatas who speak what is true have uttered this truth. And then verse 18 is in quotations, right, in brackets. So it's a quotation from a sutra, which I guess is in the end note, 24. So let's look at the end note, 24, see what sutra it's from. Yeah, there on page 173. Flip to the back to page 173. So there's the sutra, the Subahu Paripracha Sutra. So you can look that up on Google if you want, and I'm sure you can find it. Furthermore, the Bodhisattva should perfectly train himself in the following way. He should consider that if those who are now lions, tigers, dogs, jackals, vultures, storks, crows, owls, insects, bees, and mosquitoes will, in the future, awaken to the unsurpassable enlightenment, why, while I am a human being, should I degenerate the enthusiasm in entertaining enlightenment, even at the cost of my life? Right? So the Buddha is basically saying, look, all these animals, tigers, lions, down to ants, mosquitoes, eventually they'll all become enlightened. So now you, as a human being, why should you not be enthusiastic? Because compared to the animals, you're so much closer. It's so much easier for you to become enlightened. So then the question comes, well, why is it true that all the animals will eventually become enlightened? How is that? Why is that the case? Maybe we'll come back to it later, if you're interested. But the idea is here, according to the Pali, not the Pali Canon, but according to the Sanskrit lineage of sutras, of the Buddhist teachings, that every sentient being, all of us, all human beings, all animals, all spirits, whatever sentient being there is, it means a person, someone that has a mind and is not fully enlightened. They all have the potential to become fully enlightened, right? So then the question is, well, why is that? But basically, just to note here, at this time, then, you know, if all these insects, flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects will achieve enlightenment, which is so hard to find, then why should I not have enthusiasm? Because I'm a human and I have the ability to discriminate, as we'll say below, to discriminate what are virtuous actions, what are non-virtuous actions, what is a wholesome way to behave, what is the unwholesome way to behave, what are actions and behaviors that bring me closer to the ultimate happiness of full enlightenment, and what are those which lead me into more suffering of samsara. Right? So thinking like that, then at least just keep going in the right direction. Right? Don't give up hope. If they develop, so verse 18, if they develop the strength of their exertion, even those who are flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects will win the unsurpassable awakening, which is so hard to find. So that's generating confidence that it's possible for us to achieve enlightenment, and thereby stoking our enthusiasm, not being despondent. Right? Yeah, it's kind of like a good analogy for this, I find often helpful, I often mention here, is like, you know, if you're climbing a mountain, if any of you walked up, you know, a big hill or a mountain, then you can experience very tangibly, you know, if you're walking up a mountain, if you look at, you know, right where you're going, say it has 1,000 steps, you know? If you look at just the steps in front of you and think, okay, now I'll take one step, then I take another step, then I take one step. One step is not a big deal, right? To go up one step is quite easy, right? So if you just, okay, now I'll do one step, then another step, then you get tired, you rest, okay, now I'll take a few more steps. Then it's all quite manageable, quite easy. And you can keep doing that for a long time. And if you just keep doing that, eventually you reach the top, you know? You reach the top of the mountain. Whereas if right from the bottom you look at the top and you think, oh, it's so far away, how am I ever going to get up there? Right away you make yourself feel more like defeated, feel more tired, feel more like, oh, this is so difficult to do, like how can I ever do that? Then it makes it harder to, and you don't look at right where you're going, you look way up and then just keep trying to go. Then, looking way up, you just kind of fumble along where you're going, and then each step is more difficult because you're not really paying attention to it. You're looking way up ahead and feeling like, oh, I can't possibly do this. So it's the same in spiritual practice. If we look far ahead at this kind of very, very high level, the highest level of kind of realization, highest level of development, or maturity, we can imagine. And then we look at ourselves when we're tired, when we're irritable, when we make mistakes, when things aren't going well. Then we feel, yeah, like how could I ever be like that? But rather, if we just look and see, you know, the situation we're in now, whatever challenges we're faced, whatever shortcomings we see with ourselves, and we just think, well, how can I improve just a little bit? You know, what little improvement can I make in my way of thinking, in my outlook, in my attitude, in my relationship with my, you know, my siblings or my parents, or, you know, with my housekeepers or my neighbors or whatever. What little improvement can I make in my behavior, in my life today? You know, and we just think, today, what can I do today? Then it's something very tangible, but we're going in the right direction, right? So if we keep doing that every day, make a habit of just trying to improve ourselves as a person every day, that eventually we reach the long-term goal, right? But if we just look way ahead and think, oh, how can I ever be like that? Then, you know, we kind of don't even feel like doing anything today, right? We just defeat ourselves. So that's what it's talking about, those verses 17, 18. So now verse 19. It will be so if I do not forsake the Bodhisattva's way of life. So he's saying eventually, even like all those insects will become enlightened. Also, it will be so, I will also become enlightened, as long as I do not forsake the Bodhisattva's way of life, which is being described throughout this whole book, right? That's the name of the book. It's a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. So it will be so if I do not forsake the Bodhisattva's way of life. Why should someone like myself who has been born in the human race, not attain awakening, since I am able to recognize what is beneficial and what is of harm. Right? So now I'm a human being, so I have so much. It's so much easier for me to engage in spiritual practice than any animals or insects like that. And because I have intelligence, one of the most unique, distinguishing characteristics of human beings is that separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom is that we have this incredible discriminating intelligence. We're able to discriminate between, we're able to analyze and think what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, right? So as long as we analyze, we use our intelligence to analyze what is a good way of life, what is a positive, constructive way of life, what is a destructive, negative, harmful way of life. And we try to, always direct ourselves towards the good, then we're going in the right direction, and eventually we'll gain all possible benefits of that we can possibly attain. So not to it, So if it will be so, if I do not forsake the Bodhisattva's way of life, why should someone like myself, who has been born in the human race, who has been born as a human, not attain awakening, since I am able to recognize what is beneficial and what is of harm? Then verse 20. Nevertheless, it frightens me. So now he's having more doubt, right? The author himself is expressing kind of more trepidation, more hesitation. Nevertheless, it frightens me to think that I may have to give away my arms and legs without discriminating between which is heavy and what is light. I am reduced to fear through confusion. So now here he's talking about, if you read in the Buddhist sutras about the deeds of bodhisattvas, you see many bodhisattvas at different times. They give away cut off their arms and give to others, or their legs, or give their blood, or give their whole life. Like in the sutra we read last time I was here, there was in one of Shakyamuni Buddha's past lives. He explained how in a past life he was a young prince with two brothers, and they were walking through the jungle, and they came upon a tigress who was starving to death. And she had a batch of cubs, like five cubs, and the cubs were also starving. She had no milk to give them, and she was so hungry that she was contemplating eating her own cubs just to preserve her life. So the prince who was Shakyamuni Buddha's past life, he saw this, and he felt great compassion for the tigress and decided to offer his body to the tigress. And also, could we do that? Like, no way. We'd see a tigress in the forest and just run the other direction, not to mention, see if she's hungry or not, right? So, and then not to mention, offer our body to her, give up our life for her, no? So you see, these incredible kind of mind-blowing deeds of bodhisattvas like this. There's another story about Sadaprabhudita, who was a bodhisattva who, he wanted the teachings of the perfection of wisdom teachings, and then basically, when his teacher came to sit on the throne and teach in a certain area, there was a lot of dust in the area. So he cut open the veins of his arms and spread his blood on the ground to settle the dust. Right? So it's kind of like, who would do that, now? I can't imagine possibly thinking of doing that. Not to mention all the other doubts that come with that. But anyway, in the sutras, there's all these tales of the Buddha's past bodhisattvas' deeds, where they offer their bodies. So he's talking about, if in getting enlightened, in verse 20, saying, if getting enlightened means I have to cut off my arms and legs and sacrifice my body, and without discriminating between these heavy kind of acts of charity versus just ordinary, mild, light acts of charity, then I'm reduced to fear through confusion. How could I possibly do that? I'm reduced, and why would I want to do that? Then I feel like giving up. Right? So he says, nevertheless, it frightens me to think that I may have to give away my arms and legs without discriminating between what is heavy and what is light. I am reduced to fear through confusion. Then verse 21, for over countless myriads of eons, I have been cut, stabbed, burned, and flayed alive innumerable times, but I have not awakened. So he's saying, why don't I want to do those things that bodhisattvas do, cutting their bodies and giving away their bodies and enduring being cut and stabbed and burned? Because already in samsara, I've experienced all those things and I haven't become enlightened. Enduring being cut, stabbed, burned, and flayed alive, like in the hells, or being tortured as a human, or being an animal, being slaughtered. How many times have we taken rebirth and endured being slaughtered as an animal? You see like chickens with their feathers pulled alive, or some animals even like skinned alive, or all kinds of heinous ways that humans kill animals, humans kill one another, and not to mention like in the hells, all the things we've suffered. So I've suffered all kinds of physical, pain like that, and anguish, but I've not become awakened, not become fully enlightened. So why would I want to do that as a Bodhisattva? So then he's going to give the answer below. Verse 22, yet the suffering involved in my awakening will have a limit. It is like the suffering of an incision made in order to remove and destroy a greater pain. So first in that verse, he's saying two important things. So first, in the first two lines, he's distinguishing between the suffering we endure in samsara and the suffering we endure in order to become enlightened. Right? Yet, it says yet, so it's a contrasting word, yet the suffering involved in my awakening will have a limit. So he's comparing the two. All the suffering that we experience in samsara, like hunger, thirst, disappointment, betrayal, depression, as long as we endure those sufferings while we're chasing after objects of attachment, right? While we're chasing worldly pleasure, the pleasure of samsara, we endure so much hardship. Like even these days, in order to just to make a lot of money, staying up late, working long hours, enduring incredible stress and anxiety, and conflict with your business partners or peers at work and so forth. Then not to mention, then through the force of the karma of attachment and anger, and taking rebirth and experiencing old age, sickness, death, and all kinds of physical and mental suffering again and again. But all the suffering we experience in samsara, as long as it's done with a worldly motivation, a motivation just to achieve the pleasure of this life, just to achieve my own satisfaction, just to achieve happiness, different levels of happiness within samsara, that doesn't have an end. There's no end to it. Right? So all the hardship we endure, it's not like it's leading us to eventual resolution of something. It's just leading us into more situations of hardship. Right? So that's how samsara works. So as long as we don't understand what samsara is, and we're just caught up in anger and attachment, and self-cherishing, miserliness, and jealousy, and so forth. As long as we're led along by the afflictive emotions, especially at the root of which is ignorance, grasping at a kind of self, an independently existing self, which actually doesn't exist at all. As long as we're caught up in grasping at a false sense of self, and then through that have attachment, anger, and so forth, then whatever we do, whatever hardships we experience, they're not leading us to an end resolution. They're just leading us into more of the same, more of all the difficulty of samsara. Whereas, by contrast, yet, he says, so at 22, yet the suffering involved in my awakening will have a limit. So whereas by contrast, if we have the motivation to be free from samsara, we get some idea of what samsara is, that, we have a clear idea that liberation, nirvana, liberation from samsara is possible, that full enlightenment is possible, and we generate a motivation to achieve those, and then we engage in Dharma practice, as well as all the ordinary things we have to do to sustain our life, working, having relationships with family and friends, all the things we do. But if we do all those things with a motivation to be free from samsara and a motivation to achieve full enlightenment, then still, of course, we endure a lot of hardship. We experience a lot of difficulty and pain. But all of that we experience, in a way that is leading us to freedom from samsara and enlightenment. So eventually it has an end, right? Because freedom from samsara means you never experience suffering again. Full enlightenment means you never experience any hardship again, right? So there's a difference in experiencing hardships that just lead us into more hardship, and experiencing hardships in a way that leads to an ultimate end from hardships, right? So then if we see that our motivation is to achieve liberation and enlightenment, and we generate some wisdom about how to achieve that, and then we apply that motivation and wisdom every day, then all the difficulty we endure becomes more bearable, because we know, well, it's leading me to an eventual ultimate resolution, rather than just leading me into, like, a hamster running on a spinning wheel, more of the same, right? So, yeah. And then the last two lines say, of verse 22, it is like the suffering of an incision made in order to remove and destroy greater pain. Right? So you can kind of compare, like, you know, an incision being cut with a knife. Right? So when you go for surgery, the doctor has to cut you with a knife, right? Make an incision to take out a tumor, or, you know, sew up something, or whatever, put a suture or do some operation. So say you have like appendicitis, for example. You have an infected appendix, you have incredible pain. If you don't do something about it, it's going to explode and you're going to die. So you rush to the hospital, the doctor makes a big cut, right? And then he draws out the pus, or I'm not sure how they treat appendicitis, or cut off the appendix or whatever, and then sutures it up, and then you're healed, right? So if they didn't give you anesthetic, being cut, it would hurt a lot. Like usually we go under anesthetic so we don't feel anything. But so they didn't give you anesthetic, the being cut, it would hurt a lot. But they're cutting you in order to save your life, right? So to reduce a much greater pain of the appendicitis going on and then dying, you endure a little bit of pain. So he's saying spiritual practice is like that. Of course, you endure hardship. You encounter difficulty. Sometimes it can be miserable. It can be physically painful, mentally painful. It can be difficult. But you do so for the purpose of reducing greater pain, right? Whereas worldly activities, where we encounter a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties, but it's like, so worldly activities would be more like, instead of being cut with a knife for surgery, being cut with a knife like in a knife fight with someone else. It's just going to lead to more of the same, you know. If you go to a knife fight and you stab someone or you get stabbed, well, you're likely just to get in another fight with the person again in the future, right? It's not leading to any kind of resolution of pain. It's just leading to more suffering, right? So like that, comparing the hardship endured in spiritual practice versus that endured in worldly, selfish pursuits. And then verse 23, so he keeps going with the analogy. Even doctors eliminate illness with unpleasant medical treatments. So in order to overcome manifold sufferings, I should be able to put up with some discomfort, right? So even to treat ordinary illness, doctors employ methods, medical treatment that brings some discomfort. So in order to achieve, in order to overcome the great illness of suffering and samsara, of course the Buddhists are going to employ some methods that involve hardship and pain. So I should be able to put up with some discomfort. And then verse 24, yet the Supreme Physician, so it means the Buddha, verse 24, yet the Supreme Physician does not employ common medical treatments such as these. With an extremely gentle technique, he remedies all the greatest ills. So he's saying the Buddha does not employ common medical treatments such as making incisions or giving us very bitter medicines or making us undergo kind of painful, physically painful, treatments which involve a lot of discomfort. Rather, with an extremely gentle technique, right? So you see the Buddha's advice, extremely gentle, how to practice. Not pushing us into situations that are totally overwhelm us, but rather showing us a very gradual, gentle, kind of graduated path where we gradually can endure more and more hardship. With an extremely gentle technique, he remedies all the greatest ills. So the greatest ills means all the suffering of samsara, which includes like the suffering of birth, the suffering of old age, suffering of sickness, suffering of death, suffering of meeting with situations that we abhor, suffering of being separated from people and situations that we crave, we enjoy, suffering of being disappointed again and again, the suffering of having no certainty what's going to happen to us, the suffering of never having satisfaction, suffering of being separated from our body again and again, the suffering of taking rebirth, being conjoined with a new body again and again, and so forth. So he remedies all the sufferings of samsara. Then verse 25, at the beginning the guide of the world encourages the giving of such things as food. Later, when accustomed to this, one may progressively start to give away even one's flesh. At such a time when my mind is developed to the point of regarding my body like food, then what hardship would there be when it came to giving away my flesh? Right? So then he's describing this kind of graduated way of practice that the Buddha teaches. with verse 25. At the beginning, the guide of the world, so it means the Buddha, encourages the giving of such things as food. Right, so encourages to practice generosity by giving things that are easy to give away, like a few rupees, or a few biscuits, giving a meal, food to other people, our friends or strangers. So we practice generosity by giving easy things to give, right? And then we build up. So this is talking about then we have joy in doing that. We see the joy in giving away, a little bit of food, or a rupee or two. And we give next time as we see the joy that we receive from it and the benefit it gives to others, the joy it brings to others. And we recognize the merit that we create by doing so, and then how that will give us the ability to benefit others more in the future, and also serves as energy for our spiritual path. Then we practice greater and greater acts of giving. So we start small. In any kind of meditation practice, this is always the pattern. Like even say you're meditating on patience. Maybe you recognize there's some people you get really easily irritated with. And you want to meditate on patience to reduce anger. So when you're meditating on the antidotes to anger, we don't start with meditating on the person that we find like the most deplorable person we can possibly imagine. Because as soon as we think of that person, our mind will just be overcome with irritation and kind of aversion again, and we won't be able to do anything constructive in meditation. We'll just be full of thoughts of resentment and anger towards that person. So rather, instead, when we're starting to meditate on the antidotes to anger, we start with someone who we just dislike a little bit. Basically, there may be a family or friend, but there's some things that irritate us, that we dislike about, that sometimes we become a little bit irritated, a little bit angry at the person. So we start with a person like that, some manageable kind of instance of anger, and think about the faults, and think about how it arose, why do I react like that, how can I react in a different way in the future, how can I practice more tolerance and patience towards that person. So then when you build up those kind of, the skill in knowing how to apply the antidotes to anger in the small situation, then you think about someone you maybe get a little more angry at, right, and practice in that way, and then more and more. So as you feel your skill, your ability to deal with the situation increases, then you give yourself greater and greater challenges. I mean, video games work the same way, right? You start with a small difficulty level and then increase. So meditation is the same, spiritual practice is the same. You start with a small difficulty level, and then as your skill and ability increases, you face more and more difficult challenges. So here he's just talking about generosity. Same with generosity. You just start to practice generosity and you go out and give away all your clothes and all your money, you're going to end up just resenting it, thinking, oh, that was a terrible idea, that was stupid, like, I'm never going to do that again, and then give up the whole practice of generosity, right? So you don't do that. You start giving little things, and then you see the joy it brings you, and then you give a little more, until even, can you imagine, even you happily give away your body, to someone else. So again, it's difficult to imagine that, but if we, step by step, again the analogy of, instead of looking at the mountain peak and feeling defeated, just go one step at a time and you gradually make progress. So again, those two verses, I think it's, verse 25, 26. At the beginning, the guide of the world encourages the giving of such things as food. Later, when accustomed to this, one may progressively start to give away even one's flesh. So that's a big jump from food to one's flesh. But you can think, when a mosquito bites you, instead of shooing it away, just let it bite you. Think about what the benefit the mosquito gets from getting a full meal from you. How nice it is. For example, that's probably the most small kind of instance of giving away one's flesh. Probably even less would be clipping your fingernails and giving it to some ants or something, or pulling off a piece of dead skin and giving it to, letting some animals outside your house, hopefully, eat it or something. It's easier, but anyway. Here he's talking about actually giving away one's flesh. Then verse 26, at such time when my mind is developed to the point of regarding my body like food, right? So we develop our mind more and more and more to regard even our body, our possessions, even our roots of merit, our whole life in a completely different way. Instead of being totally selfish, self-centered, to be totally, radically altruistic, such that we can even I mean, you can kind of imagine, if you have total faith that, I was trying to, like, often when I read that story of in the Buddha's past life as a prince giving his body away to the tigress, I think it's in the Golden Light Sutra, we read.
Yes.
Yeah. Then you often try to imagine how did he, I don't know, because on one hand we talk about how precious it is to have a human life, how difficult it is to take a human rebirth. And then to meet the Dharma, and then to be able to practice Dharma, it's an incredible, rare opportunity. So then to give all that up just to feed a tigress, it seems kind of silly. No? It seems kind of not so smart in one way. So sometimes I think about that story, but I imagine, like, if you have total confidence that, first of all, future lives exist, that you're going to take rebirth, and you have total confidence that in the power of bodhicitta, in the power of the motivation to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, you have total confidence that the power of that motivation, whatever you do with that, is incredibly virtuous, a powerful virtue. And then you give away and then you know that your attitude of bodhicitta is so stable that even if you're destroying your own life, that won't waver. You won't waver from that motivation. Like most of us, we might, I mean, like, I speak for myself. I have the motivation, contrived bodhicitta sometimes, but I'm sure, like, if I was all of a sudden, like, dying, I'm not sure I could really maintain it, no? Even when I get a little sick, get a high fever and feel really hungry and have a bad headache, like, it's difficult to maintain, for me, difficult to maintain an attitude of bodhicitta. So not to mention, like, you're dying. So then, but if you're very confident that you can maintain that motivation totally stably, and then give away your body, then you have confidence that the power of that incredible, act of generosity with the motivation of bodhicitta, even giving away your body, that is such a powerful, virtuous attitude, a powerful, virtuous deed, then that will throw you. There's no way you're going to take rebirth in any worse state. Rather, you'll take incredible good rebirth, where you have much better conditions to continue on the spiritual path. So if you have total confidence and clarity about that, you know that for sure, then it seems like, I can kind of imagine, maybe it's not, in that situation, maybe it wouldn't be so difficult to give away the body, because it's more like just casting off one set of clothes and putting on a much nicer, if it's like, kind of like, if you only have one set of clothes and you don't have anything else to wear, then of course, to throw off those clothes would be just kind of foolish. You feel like you're going to end up naked, so of course you're not going to do that. But if you have one set of clothes and you have a great, much better new set of clothes just right there on the bed, ready to put on, then throwing off the old set of clothes is not difficult because you have something else to put right on, so easy, right? So I think for a bodhisattva, it must be kind of like that. Like they have total confidence that just giving up this body is no big deal because immediately I'll take a much better rebirth with no problem. So.
What about the pain he caused to his parents, though?
Yeah. But then also, I mean, I'm sure he knows that in the future he'll be able to come back and help them even more. He'll be able to be more helpful to them in the future. Because more quickly he achieves enlightenment, the more quickly he can lead his parents to freedom from suffering. So yeah, there's has to make a compromise now. Nothing comes without any kind of downsides. But then also think about what about the role model that he showed to his parents. Of course, his parents endure a lot of pain and suffering, remorse and missing him. But then also, gradually they'll think about what is it that our son did? What a heroic kind of act. What an incredibly kind of virtuous deed. They can be proud of that. Okay, so then 26. At such a time when my mind is developed to the point of regarding my body like food, then what hardship would there be when it came to giving away my flesh? And then, okay, 27. And then I'll open up for questions. Having forsaken all transgression, there would be no suffering, and due to wisdom, there would be no lack of joy. But now my mind is afflicted by mistaken conceptions, and my body has caused harm by unwholesome deeds. Right? So he's just saying, he's trying to imagine in 27, how could a bodhisattva do such a thing as give away their flesh? He's saying, having forsaken all transgression, so having forsaken all immoral acts, having forsaken creating all negative karma whatsoever, right? Because any suffering we have, we experience the force of our own non-virtuous actions. The force of our own having created negative karma, then we experience suffering, right? So a bodhisattva, if they've totally abandoned creating any negative karma whatsoever, then there's no cause for them to experience suffering. So once all the negative karma they created in the past has been purified, a person doesn't create any new negative karma, then there's no cause for suffering, so then one doesn't experience any suffering or hardship whatsoever. So having forsaken all transgression, means negative karma, there would be no suffering. And due to wisdom, there would be no lack of joy. So due to a bodhisattva also having wisdom, seeing everything is in the nature of empty of inherent existence, seeing the ultimate nature of all phenomena, whatever arises just appears like a dream, right? It's like, if even, imagine, that's one of the, once we see the ultimate nature of all phenomena, then it said we see all things as like an illusion or like a dream. So imagine, it's kind of like the difference between having a nightmare or having dreams, good dreams and bad dreams both, having all kinds of dreams, but while you're dreaming you don't know it's a dream. You just think it's real. So then it causes all kinds of trauma. When the dream's going well, you feel really ecstatic and happy. When the dream's going really bad, you feel kind of miserable and afraid, right? Traumatized. But if you know all the time, so another person, imagine they know it's a dream. Whenever they're dreaming, they know they're dreaming. Still, the dream kind of appearances and the story and the whole situation unfolds, but they know it's all a dream. So that for that person, it's all just kind of, it's like watching a drama, watching a play. There's no reactivity because they see, okay, now this happening, now this happening, now this happening, okay. Sometimes good things happen, okay, interesting, enjoyable. Sometimes bad things happen, also interesting. Kind of just watching, okay, now this happened. They don't take seriously because they know it's a dream. Similarly, like a child, versus an adult watching a horror, like a horror film. If you know it's just a movie, it's not real, it's fake, then you can kind of enjoy the thrills it brings without really being kind of overwhelmed by fear. Whereas if you don't know it's not real, you think it's something real, then it's much more traumatizing. So in that way, for a bodhisattva, they see that all the things that appear, they're in the nature of impermanence. There's no inherently existent person, there's no inherently existent other phenomena. Everything's just like an illusion, like a dream, and arises due to certain causes and conditions, and will also change and pass away. So for them, it's all just kind of, it doesn't bring trauma, doesn't bring suffering. That's what he's saying when he says there, in verse 27, in the second line, and due to wisdom, there would be no lack of joy. So rather seeing the ultimate nature of things, they see it like a dream, and they feel joyful seeing all the things, different things they see. Of course, not that they don't have compassion, but now my mind, so instead of that kind of perspective, now my mind is afflicted by mistaken conceptions, especially ignorance, attachment, anger, and my body is caused harm by unwholesome deeds. Right? So now my mind is overwhelmed by ignorance. It's like I'm not able to see the dream as a dream, but rather everything I see, I grasp it as real, being much more real than it is. And my body is caused harm. My body and my mind are caused harm due to my own non-virtuous karma, my own negative karma that I've created in the past, my own wholesome deeds. And then let's just read verse 28 too. So because he continues this comparison with bodhisattvas, ordinary being versus a bodhisattva. As their bodies are happy due to their merits, so this is bodhisattvas, their bodies are happy or experience pleasant sensations due to their merits, and their minds are happy due to their wisdom. Even if they remained in cyclic existence for others, why would the compassionate ones ever be upset? Right? So here, there's this big kind of debate in Buddhism about between the Pali canon and the Sanskrit canon, right? So in the Pali canon, basically the Buddha gave teachings for people who they want to get out of samsara as quickly as possible. That's their main goal. is that they see all the suffering they themselves experience. They want to be free from that as soon as possible. They see the suffering they themselves experience from life to life, right? And they want to be totally free from that, from taking rebirth. They don't want to take rebirth anymore. They want to get out of samsara as quickly as possible. So for that, a person with that kind of mental outlook, disposition, the Buddha taught all the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, and the Pali Canon, basically, sutras of the Pali Canon. But then there's another, so whereas when the Buddha taught the Sanskrit canon, the kind of person he was teaching to was a person who, they're not so concerned about themselves. They think I'm just one person. There's infinite other people in the world whose combined suffering is infinitely greater than mine. What is my hardship and suffering compared to that of all, my relatives, my friends, my neighbors, my countrymen, my all the other human beings, all the other animals in the world? They suffer so much more than me. So I should do something, and all my happiness comes about in dependence upon them. So I should do whatever I can to relieve the suffering of all beings in the world, no matter how long it takes, or no matter if it requires me taking rebirth in samsara infinite amount of times, right? So a person who follows the Pali Canon might think, why, they think, well, why, I don't want to experience suffering again and again and again, so I'm not going to try to become enlightened. I'm not going to try to reduce the suffering of all others. I'm just going to get out as soon as I can. And if I were to remain in samsara, in order to benefit others, it entails so much hardship. I couldn't possibly bear it. Right? So here he's kind of answering that doubt, saying, actually, for a bodhisattva who remains in samsara to work for the welfare of others, it doesn't entail a lot of hardship. And he's explaining why. So in this verse, he says, as their bodies are happy due to their merits. So physically they experience only comfort and pleasant sensations, pleasant experiences due to their merit, because they have so much merit. And their minds are happy due to their wisdom, right? Due to their understanding of the nature of reality and their skill in dealing with every different situation. Their minds are unhappy. So even if they remain in cyclic existence for the benefit of others, why would the compassionate ones, so the compassionate ones means bodhisattvas, why would they ever be upset? Right? So it's not that by remaining in samsara to work for the welfare of others, they experience a lot of hardship. Rather, it's quite the opposite. By remaining in samsara to work for the welfare of others, they experience infinite joy. So we can apply that even in this life, If in this life, if we, when we experience hardships in our work, or our family, or our personal life, or with our health, if we experience those within a mind that's thinking only about me and my desires and my aims and what I want, and just thinking about ourself alone, it seems totally overwhelming. Like those problems we have, they're totally all-encompassing and seem very difficult to deal with. Whereas if we think rather that I am a servant of others, what am I? I'm just one person. I'm not so important. Rather, the welfare of my whole family, the welfare of my whole my community, the welfare of all the other sentient beings, my brother and sister sentient beings. That's much more important. Then when we experience problems, it's like, okay, it's not such a big deal. It's just something, a challenge we have to face, but we face it within the perspective of, the challenges of others are so much more, the hardship of others is so much more. So this little thing is not difficult to bear. I just bear it and then keep working and trying to use my life in whatever way I can to benefit others. Right? So it makes all the challenges we face seem much more manageable, and even can be enjoyable. Okay, so now, any questions before we break? Yeah.
This last notice, I believe if I'm surviving, I'm here, then I can be helpful to others. Rather than if I have to diminish myself or take a blame or something for something for the greater good of the community or for company person. So I happen lately I've been into one situation like that.
Sure.
So I choose to be self-protected rather than take a blame for larger society.
Yeah.
So the motivation is behind me is that if I'm there, I can sustain and do well, not just in that front, maybe on the larger scale, from a holistic point of view. But at the imminent point, when I have to react at that point, it seems like I'm not doing greater good, or not thinking the greater good for the entire company.
Sure.
So how does it align in terms of, because motivation is different there.
Yeah, I think if you're thinking for the long term, yeah, it's not that you always have to take the lower position and take the blame for, you know, unfairly or something. That's not necessarily the case. But yeah, if your motivation has to be clear. I mean, that's the main thing is the motivation. If your motivation really is, you know, to be able to work more effectively for the good of, you know, everyone in the whole, then yeah, then what you do should be. I mean, that's a clear guide, you know, for what to do. It's not always the case that in every situation you should take the lower position, offer the victory to others. But in some case, you know, that you should, what? In the situation you were saying is what? Well, not the specifics, but the first thing you said was?
I will just quote this instance. Something has gone wrong in previous few years in terms of some company recruitment, you know,
Yeah.
which I've highlighted, and now I'm being one kind of function head.
Yeah.
So there's some audit happening, so I need to take care of that as a functional head.
Yeah.
But I choose not to put it and take blame from my side, saying that this is how we cook or do something.
Right.
So I told I'm not talking about this.
Yeah.
But seeing it from a greater good from the company's perspective, I am being one functional head. I should have taken on the responsibility. Some stories that
But you're not doing, because you feel in the long term that won't be more beneficial. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not sure I clearly see what if you think you're saying.
From my side, in terms of motivation, one, if I take that accountability for something wrong that has been done previously and cover it with something artificial and not substantial, strong as of now.
Yeah.
If I take that, something will subside as of now, but in the long run, it will not be a good thing.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an appropriate way to think. I mean, we should think more in the long term.
But at this moment, if you happen to be the directors, it could be perceived in a different way.
Right.
They may be disappointed.
Yeah.
Maybe hurting them. So
right.
From Dichita's point of view, I think I'm not solving that.
Well, no, that comes back to the analogy of the surgeon, no? The surgeon who's, you know, temporarily hurting the body of the patient by making an incision, but for a greater long-term good. So it's kind of like that analogy. Maybe causing some temporary pain to the, you know, the directors or the other people in your company, but not with the motivation to cause them pain, just to cause them pain. It doesn't just end there. With the motivation that in the long term, the company as a whole becomes better, and it becomes stronger. Then that's good motivation. Yeah. Yes, Abba, and then Archana, and then Subhashini, and then. Yeah.
Verse 19.
Yes.
Where it says, since I am able to recognize what is beneficial and what is of harm. That's rather debatable, isn't it?
Oh, what's debatable?
Well, a lot of people seem to think that certain things are beneficial and a lot of people seem to think that those very same things are not.
Yeah, you mean it's debatable whether people know how to distinguish what is beneficial and what is harmful?
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely the case that all of us don't. I mean, even we ourselves often don't. But sometimes we do, you know? And we have the ability to learn.
How do we know? Because we
and here the comparison is to the animals in verse 18.
They're completely convinced that you're right. They're completely convinced that you're right and the other lot is wrong. So what's the yardstick to gauge?
Well, hold on. First of all, the comparison is to animals in verse 18, right? He's comparing to flies, mosquitoes, bees, and insects.
19.
I know, but the verses don't exist independently of one another.
That's right. That's right.
So.
No, it says, all right, the mosquito, the little ones are able to finally experience enlightenment. Now I should be able to too because I'm a human being. So, and what distinguishes me from them is that I'm able to recognize what is beneficial and what is not.
Right.
That, I'm saying, is debatable.
Well, hold on. But there's a difference between, like, I mean, able can be looked at different ways. I'm able to distinguish right and wrong. You can read that two different ways. You can be able to distinguish what is right and wrong right now, or you can just, in general, as a human being, you can be able to learn to distinguish what is right and wrong, right? To have that ability to learn to do that eventually. So,
all right.
There's definite. I mean, I think most every human being has, you know, some capacity to distinguish what is right and wrong in some situation. You know, from like, you know, when to cross the road or when not, whether to eat or whether or not, whether to sleep or not.
I'm talking about in an ethical and a moral sense, in a human sense, you know.
Yeah.
There is always this huge divide, and both sides of the divide seem to feel that they are absolutely and completely right.
Well, definitely. I mean, you're talking like politics or something.
Even to the extent of causing harm to other people. They feel they're right. So is this correct, that I am able to recognize what is beneficial and what is of harm? I don't think so.
Not 100%.
So you are not, you, Alan, are not able to distinguish what is right and wrong?
I don't think that this is a blanket statement which is correct for human beings.
Of course it's not. Not everybody, not even for ourselves in many situations, right?
Yeah, you're also ambivalent at times.
But in some situations, are you able to distinguish what is right and wrong?
I hope so.
Yeah. And are other people even...
So.
Most other people are. In some situations, you know, we start off with, you know, having some kind of accurate intelligence, able to discriminate, you know, good from bad, right and wrong in some situations. And then, you know, through experience, we try things, we make mistakes, then we learn, and then we try other things, and then gradually we improve. We talk to other people, see how things work out. So even, you know, governments work like that. You know, sometimes they do one thing one way, then they see makes a total mess, and then they change to another way. So even societies work like that, hopefully, but it's not that there's always a gradual upward trajectory, you know? Rather, sometimes we improve, sometimes we decline, sometimes improve, sometimes decline, right? Yeah. But the general thing here is if you compare to people who have much less, you know, other human beings or animals who have much less ability to discriminate, then we have some ability to discriminate between right and wrong, at least in some situations.
Better than mosquitoes.
Yeah, better than mosquitoes. So then based on that ability, we try to build on that. We try to use that and learn and make, you know, generate more and more wisdom, more and more, be more and more well-informed, gain more and more experience, right? And then lead better and better lives, become better and better people. Yeah. Archana?
Yeah. I wanted to ask, in the beginning actually with verse 16, he said that the practice of exchanging self for others is that the way to develop enthusiasm? As in,
Let's see.
I should gather support for enthusiasm and then for that?
No, I think that he's saying you generate enthusiasm and then you engage in that practice.
Okay.
I don't think he's saying that's the way to generate. That's the way to generate enthusiasm.
Okay.
Although generally, I mean, there should be a feedback loop between, you know, your enthusiasm to engage in a practice, and then you do the practice, and then you see the beneficial results, and then you get more enthusiasm, and then you do the practice, do different practice again. You know, like generosity. First you think about, oh, what are the benefits of, you know, giving, passing generosity. Then you practice a small acts of generosity. Then you see the other person happy, you feel happy. Then you gain more enthusiasm, and you do it again. Then again you have a positive outcome. Then again, more enthusiasm. There should be this feedback loop between enthusiasm and positive experience.
And then verse 18 about flies, mosquitoes, and here basically it's talking about Buddha nature, right?
Exactly, yeah. Buddha nature. Yeah. That they all have the potential to become fully enlightened. We all have Buddha nature.
And verse 28, like as their bodies are happy due to their merits and minds are happy due to their wisdom. What level of bodhisattvas is it talking about?
It's not as specific. It doesn't specify the level. But I think, I mean, like most things, they exist on a scale, right? So here he's talking about bodhisattva, so you could be talking about, you know, the first level of bodhisattva is the small path of accumulation, right? So you could be talking about them on up. But the more difficult question would be in verse 27, where it says, having forsaken all transgression.
Yeah.
At what point has a bodhisattva forsaken all transgression? They don't make any transgressions. Again, it's not clear exactly like what you have to define what does he mean exactly by transgression here. If you say just negative karma, creating negative karma.
No suffering, so obviously you have to give up all.
Well, yeah, at what point do bodhisattvas not have any experience, no suffering?
The seventh.
I think it's Arya, from being Arya Bodhisattva, from path of seeing on up. But then again, I mean, it's all kind of debatable. You'd have to, well, do they mean just having the feeling of suffering, or they don't have any truth of suffering? They don't experience any of the truth of suffering, which means they're aggregates, their body and mind being under the power of afflictive emotions and karma. So that from being, I think the path of seeing on up, they don't have the truth of suffering, and probably no feeling of suffering either. But generally, even you can see from the state we're in now, if we try to live our life more and more in a virtuous way, habituate our minds to more positive attitudes like loving kindness, compassion, and become more habituated to those attitudes, and more sensitive to people who reinforce those attitudes in us, and people that we're around who tend to diminish or obstruct us having those attitudes. Then, the way we experience life, the way we experience ourselves, the way we experience situations, the way we experience other people, the kind of people we find ourselves being around and meeting and engaging with, it changes. So I think the more we put effort into being a virtuous person, being a good person, then the more enjoyment actually we have already in this life. Just you can see a difference within a year or 2 years on up. And the more we approach every situation with wisdom, the more we experience enjoyment in every situation. And that's something we can experience, within a few months or years. We should see a difference. So this is just talking about much more kind of along the way of that scale, that path. Okay? Sebastian, you still have your question?
Yeah, I was looking at the first 2 paragraphs of this chapter.
Which numbers? First numbers?
1 and 2.
Oh, okay. You're going back.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is an assumption here, or a prescription, that because look at the paramitas, this is the fifth.
This is the fourth.
The fourth. Then it is assumed, there is an assumption that if you have the patience, then the next step is enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm also is kind of not very clear when we read the stanzas we have just done. Whether it is an enthusiasm to work towards awakening, or is it a kind of enthusiasm to generate that, that feeling that you need to. So it's not very clear in the sense whether it is enthusiasm which you need to create, or enthusiasm which you already have as a prerequisite for awakening.
Well, yeah, don't get hung up. I mean, I agree. It's not so clear, and it's a good question. But I think we shouldn't get hung up on the details, because those are not contradictory. I think it's all of those, actually. I think that's why it's not clear. It's because it's talking about enthusiasm in a very broad way. Sometimes it's enthusiasm for actually engaging in the practices of Bodhisattva. It's also talking about the enthusiasm just to have that aspiration, and the enthusiasm even we don't have the aspiration just to generate that aspiration, and then the kind of enthusiasm we need to generate in response to when we feel apathetic, we feel despondent, then what do we do? So it's talking about how enthusiasm relates in all different kinds of, in all different kinds of situations that a bodhisattva or someone aspiring to the bodhisattva path might find themselves in. So, yeah, like that.
Also, it gradually talks about, in a sense, sacrificing even your own body parts, etc.
Oh, it does, yes.
So in a sense, I don't know whether it's a kind of a guide to expect to arrive at that enthusiasm, that you can even give away your body parts, etc. So that's what's a little, I would say confusing or a little difficult to understand.
Yeah.
Because of course, the title of the very, the book itself states that it's how Bodhisattva should live, or a guide to the conduct of the Bodhisattva. In that context, one is a little confused about, there's a prescription that you need to do it, or you have to develop enthusiasm for it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, like the bodhisattva's deeds, they should be. I mean, it's definitely pushing our boundaries, pushing our own limits about what's possible.
The first stanza says, having patience, I should develop the enthusiasm. So
That's what I was.
We need to push ourselves for development.
Yeah, it's not assuming we already have enthusiasm. Rather, and again, many of the verses keep talking about how, oh, but if I do that, then what's going to come? This having kind of fear and trepidation and hesitation. So it's addressing a lot like that, all these kind of this hesitation and feeling of being too limited, and feeling like, oh, the deeds of a bodhisattva are way beyond me, totally impossible. So exactly the kind of feeling I think maybe you're experiencing when you think about giving away your body. Sounds like, yeah, and he knows that sounds kind of totally beyond what we can do, kind of bizarre.
There's a sense of unrealism about it.
Exactly, yeah.
It's not very
practical or
it's not something that
realistic.
you have to act upon.
Yeah.
And it's something
Yeah.
that is, it sets a very high level of renunciation, to the extent that you give away somebody.
Yeah, but so many things in Buddhism, this is something that comes up throughout the Buddha's teaching again and again. It's challenging our concept about what is real, what is possible, is so incredibly limited, right? So in many, many different ways, the Buddha is always pushing on that, pushing us to reconsider what is your potential, what is possible, what is reality. So this is just another way that he's doing it. And I think he's doing it quite conscientiously. He knows. That's why he's saying, like, you have to start, what does he say?
Patience is a prerequisite to develop enthusiasm.
Well, like in verse 17, he asks, he imagines asking, how shall I ever possibly awaken? That kind of attitude. And then verse 20, the last line, I am reduced to fear through confusion. This very kind of confusion, how could I possibly do that? That seems, why would I want to do that? Even, what benefit would that be? So he's talking about, this kind of fear and confusion that we have about these bodhis. I mean, we look at the Jataka tales about the Buddha's past lives. He did so many radical things. Jumping into a fire, or throwing himself over a cliff as different animals, or all these, giving away his children and wife and kingdom, and all this kind of seem like really bizarre sort of things. So which in one way doesn't make sense, in one way if you think that means I have to do that to become enlightened, then I'm not sure I really want to become enlightened, right? So he knows that there's a lot of things that are described on the path that don't make sense. But he's saying don't just give up the whole thing, but rather start in a very pragmatic way, with the little things you can do. You know, like offering just a bit of food. And then you see the benefit of that, and then you practice a bit more, and then go back and think about what is actually being taught. And gradually you develop, and you find yourself, you know, in a position that you never could have imagined you were being in. It's kind of like when you were starting out in, you know, first grade, second grade in school. If someone said, you know, oh, eventually you have to be a college professor, and you have to stand in front of this classroom full of graduates and you know, lead them to show them how to become PhDs, you would have said, like, I could never do that. No way, are you crazy? But then eventually, you know, step by step, eventually you find you're in that very position that you never could have imagined being in before.
In fact, I remember one of my cousins, she finished her BA and joined NA, and then while she was in the course, she got married. So I used to think, I just finished school. To do it itself, I thought was, you know, something very big, and she's not in NA, and then of course she stopped in the sense because she got married after a few months. And you know, I traversed that whole path up to PhD, so it's at each stage, and when you're at much lower stage, you wonder, can I do it? Is it possible?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what he's talking about. Yeah. And here, the path to enlightenment is something so much, you know, so much more kind of radical. So of course, there's all kind of things we can't possibly imagine now.
Because this is a totally different kind of a path.
Yeah. Yeah, much less tangible, no? Much more insubstantial.
Yes, and not only that, it's also involves a lot of personal, from what the last few verses, of personal sacrifice in terms of giving up on body parts and things which also seem very unrealistic to me at this point.
Yeah. Okay, so we stop for a break. It's 11:45. Yeah, let's stop, have a 15-20 minute break, and we'll resume. I mean, is this the next session? I'm not sure. The second half of the session. Let's do some meditation. Yeah, let's do maybe 10-15 minutes of meditation. So, get comfortable in your meditation posture first.
Venerable, can we do the exchanging self?
No. It's too complicated to do now. We need to do something on generating enthusiasm. I mean, you can. You can do whatever you want in your own mind, but I'm not going to lead.
What did she say?
Can we do meditation on exchanging self and others? Can we do meditation on exchanging self and others?
Oh, the chocolate?
Yes, exactly. I said no. I mean, you can in your own mind. Okay. Okay.
It's more effective when it's guided by somebody. Particularly, I remember Buddhism guiding us,
Okay.
and he sensed that some of us were very scared and reluctant.
Yeah.
But he said, don't be scared, nothing will happen. And he just guided us through it. And I felt it made a particular change in my life.
Okay. Let's meditate now. Enough talking. So, well, we'll meditate on enthusiasm. I suggest, let's see, since we've been talking about enthusiasm for virtuous practices, for Dharma practice. So yeah, why don't we think of, I mean, each of us maybe slightly different, think of whatever Dharma practice. It doesn't have to be Buddhist necessarily, it can be, you know, Buddhist related, but generally practice is related to, you know, you're becoming a better person, you're striving for, you know, to be a better person in this life, striving to bring well-being to yourself and to others. and then also connect to. So future lives, striving to be able to continue your spiritual path in future lives as well. And then if you can, if it makes sense to you, and also think about, your striving, whatever spiritual practice you do, or you aspire to achieve liberation from samsara, freedom from the round of birth and death, and even seeing the suffering of other sentient beings and wanting to do whatever you can to free them from suffering, then any practice you do related to achieving full enlightenment. So first think about what kind of Dharma practices you do, what kind of practices you do to become a better person in any of these ways, on any of these levels. And then as you think of that, think what are some of the, where do you have danger of, getting caught up in frivolous activities which distract you from that, right? And how to generate, and then you become despondent. There's a danger that you become despondent, apathetic, have apathy, or laziness, and procrastination, right? And then how can you react to that? How can you apply the antidote of enthusiasm related to that, right? Okay, so there's kind of three things to think about. First, what are Dharma practice that I aspire to become a better person in this life, future lives, freedom from samsara, enlightenment. And then what are things that distract me from that, or factors that put me at risk of becoming despondent, lazy, not putting forth my best effort. Right? And then the third thing, and how can I apply some of these teachings on enthusiasm to try to generate more perseverance, more inspiration, more energy and enthusiasm for these positive practices, right? So try to think about those three things. Let's start off for about 7 minutes, and maybe I'll come in with another word of suggested instruction. So for 7 minutes, try to think about those things. And then in the second half, so in the verses we read, Shantideva talks a lot about the different way of experiencing hardship. Experiencing hardships like physical pain, like being cut or being sick or dealing with difficult people for just a worldly purpose, how that doesn't lead to any ultimate end of problems, end of suffering, but just leads us into more difficult situations in samsara, versus experiencing the same kinds of things, being physically sick or dealing with difficult people, difficult situations for a Dharma purpose, right? For the purpose of achieving full enlightenment, or a purpose of achieving liberation from samsara, or for the purpose of achieving happy, fortunate states in future lives, and so forth. How those all lead to, in that way, we experience hardship in a way that eventually comes to an end. So when you look at, try to generate enthusiasm for the Dharma practice, spiritual practice, and try to distinguish between these two different ways of experiencing hardships, and thereby generate a forbearance, which is more, has a stronger mind, able to endure difficulty in spiritual practice, recognizing that it leads to a long-term resolution of problems, as opposed just to leading into more problems like craving, attachment, and so forth. So again, take about 7 minutes to think about those issues. So come to some conclusion in your meditation. Is there anything you clearly saw or discovered about enthusiasm in relation to Dharma practice, obstacles to how to generate, a different way of looking at hardships? Okay, let's stop the meditation there. I think probably one of the biggest, Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, as the Buddha taught also, probably the thing that keeps us in samsara the most strongly is just attachment. You know? Just basic attachment to ordinary food, clothes, entertainment, objects of the senses, objects of the five senses. Things, being attached to things we see, attractive sounds, attractive tastes, physical touch, physical sensations, smells. Just like animals. That's what animals are attached to mostly. So mostly, yeah, if we don't use our discriminating wisdom, we don't need Dharma. But basically we just act like animals, you know, chasing after pleasant sensations, pleasant clothes, appearance, other people's appearance, praise, some, wealth, so that we can buy things that are pleasing to the five senses, and food, comfort, all the comforts. Basically, it's that basic kind of attachment to pleasant feelings. Pleasant feelings, objects of the six senses, because objects of the five senses, they give us pleasant feelings. So when we have pleasant feelings, then temporarily we're a little bit happy, feel good. So we chase after those very short-term, very ephemeral, very kind of superficial, pleasant feelings. And then don't use our wisdom to think about, well, in the long term, what's going to bring actually more stable, more durable, more lasting kind of satisfaction, inner, pleasant feeling of the mind, mental happiness, rather than those feelings that go along with the five senses. Like when we see something that's attractive, we have a pleasant feeling. When we taste something that's attractive, have a pleasant feeling. But it depends upon the object. For example, we had coffee. It was quite delicious tea. I like the coffee that the guy down the street makes. Quite nice coffee. You drink that for a little, it's pleasant. But it depends upon getting that object again and again, which depends upon effort, making effort, to get that again and again. Whereas mental joy, it's much more satisfying in a way. If we generate mind of loving kindness, think, oh, may all beings be happy, may they be well. It's a much more subtle kind of joy, and it doesn't depend upon any external object. It just comes about through the force of our own mind, our own attention. So it's something we can generate anytime, any place, and it's something we can increase. The more we generate the intention, may all beings be well, may they be happy, we can increase the satisfaction, the pleasant experience we have more and more and more without end. Whereas, the pleasant feeling we get from tasting like coffee, for example, it only lasts a little while and then it's gone. And then even you keep drinking more coffee, it's not as pleasant anymore, it changes. It changes into suffering. So, yeah, it's largely because of our just not using our discriminating wisdom about what brings long-lasting satisfaction, that we were still in samsara from beginningless time. We're just chasing after very short-term, pleasant experiences blindly. So, yeah. Have to think about what really brings long-term well-being for ourselves and others. So, if there's any questions, I can answer questions, otherwise we dedicate. No?
So we put a whole lot of effort into those pleasures actually, and that is never going to end. Basically, you can go on doing it and
Exactly.
doing more of it, and you see even more diverse ways of achieving that, and you sort of get hooked into those, and you miss them actually if you use wisdom and say, okay, I don't need this, but you also miss them periodically and you try to go back to that.
True, yeah, you do miss, but then, I mean, you can have, I mean, one way is to just enjoy little pleasures, but then put more and more and more time and energy into like spiritual practice. Less time and energy into those kind of little pleasures. But also, as you get more experience with the pleasure of meditation, the pleasure of generating positive attitudes, compassion, loving kindness, serving others, thinking more about others, then the pleasure you get from food and clothes and gossip and stuff, it starts to seem less appealing. Then you don't, and then in that case, once you see it as not appealing, you don't miss it anymore. Even sometimes you miss it a little bit, then you try it out again, and quickly you see, oh, it's not. Like for example, when I was a teenager in my 20s, I used to listen to rock music, different rock bands and stuff. So sometimes I get a little missing for that music. So sometimes I listen to a little bit again, but then quickly I see, it's not. It's like many things you miss. You're away from home for a long time and you miss this particular food maybe your mother gave and think, oh, if I could only have that, it's going to be so great. Then you go back and you have it, and maybe at first it's nice, but then quickly it's like, okay, it's not all that I kind of fantasized. So,
like Facebook.
I don't know, I mean, different people have different things, right? For me, Facebook's not really a thing, but yeah, I can imagine it could be, yeah.
It's a horrible addiction.
Yeah, I can imagine it's very addictive. It can be very addictive. Yeah, but then the many things you don't have for a while. You used to enjoy, then you don't have for a while. Then you try again, because you build up this kind of fantasy about how nice it would be. But then you try again, and you think you can see it's not actually compared to other things I enjoy now. It's not so much. So the more we practice Dharma, it becomes more like that. The more and more the pleasure of that we get from our spiritual practice, our Dharma practice, is much more rich, much more fulfilling. Then gradually those other things, eventually they say it's like, those other things we used to enjoy are like grass to a tiger. For a tiger, deer eat grass. No? Deer, they see some nice fresh green grass and they think, oh wow, delicious, I want to go eat the grass. But a tiger, they see the grass and they couldn't care less about the grass. No? They want a deer. So eventually those things that used to be really attractive to us, that we used to enjoy so much, becomes not particularly interesting. Yes?
Venerable, everything to do with the Bodhisattva is all about improving our own patience and doing away with anger and the rest of it. It's about improving our character, our personality, our minds. But then we say that we're doing it to actually help others, which is helping others. Well, if I don't get angry with somebody, it is helping him. But when you really come to think about it, the actual kind of help that the Christians give, for example, the schools that they've built and the hospitals and the missionaries, the charity that they do, and the whole concept of donations and the rest of it. There's not so much of it in Buddhist practice. I haven't seen. There are a lot of temples.
True, yeah.
There are a lot of temples, and there's a lot of stupas, and there's a lot of probably charity that goes there. But you're not doing charity to everybody else around you. And so when you say, I want to, the happiness, everybody else is looking for happiness, and may I bring them happiness, and when you say that is the central focus of your life, well, why isn't it happening around? I don't see it happening.
Dharma rather than material things. I think they want to touch on that wisdom aspect and the Dharma, the teaching, to reach enlightenment rather than the material aspects.
That's true.
It is good. It is very
That's
necessary. It's very necessary to sit at home and meditate and pray, and I frankly can't do without it. I need it. I need it. But having done that, then you've got to do something for the other people. If that's what you're saying, everybody's looking in search of happiness.
Yeah, but doing things doesn't always mean external material things. I mean, just becoming a more peaceful person is kind of doing something. Because when you interact with people, it has effect. You know, they think about, I mean, and they're not contradictory. I mean, I agree. I mean, His Holiness often says, look at all the Christians do, all the schools and the hospitals and stuff, and how much it benefits people. As Buddhists, we need to do more of that. I mean, Dalai Lama is saying that all the time. Yeah, that's true. But then, you know, imagine, look at how many stories you hear of, like my mom tells, because my mom's from a very Catholic family in Iowa. She went to a school run by nuns, and and many of my relatives there. But so many stories of nuns who are just really angry and abusive to the kids, you know? Or the priests who, like the Catholic priests who don't know how to subdue their attachment to, you know, sexual contact, and then they have, you know, are pedophiles basically, having sexual contact with all these kids. Like, so you need both. It's not that you need one or the other. But the Buddhist, I mean, historically, the Buddhist view is that, look, we're primarily focused on the mind, because it's the mind that goes to next life. So, and the education should be Dharma education. We're not so concerned with, you know, making hospitals and making schools to serve people. We're primarily focused on teaching the path to long-lasting happiness through, like, Dharma centers like this.
At the same time, we agree that unless your tummy is full and you're healthy and you've got some money to pay your bills, you can't practice Dharma. You don't have the time.
Yeah, but traditionally that was also considered the responsibility not of the spiritual leaders, but the responsibility of the political leaders of the kingdom. So then you have like Nagarjuna's letter to a friend and Nagarjuna's precious garland, which are both teachings written to the kings who were rulers at that time, telling them how to rule the kingdom such that you provide for the welfare, you know, the food and medical care for this, you know, the children, education for the children, and care for the sick and elderly, and so forth. So you see a lot of that advice, like in those two texts specifically. Or like, look at Ashoka. I mean, it's a great example, King Ashoka. He's a Buddhist practitioner, but I mean, he made a lot of laws for the material welfare of the people in the kingdom. So I think traditionally, in like Buddhist countries, that providing, you know, education, providing medical care, providing food and clothing and sustenance is considered the responsibility of the political leaders, not of the religious leaders, right? So I mean, yeah, I mean, in the Christian world, why is it the case that the church feels like they need to have, you know, run schools and hospitals? Usually it's in places where they feel like the government isn't filling the role, right? So then they fill in.
It's a missionary thing.
Yeah, or it's a missionary thing where they want to convert people.
Yeah,
which is...
That's true.
Not necessarily. They haven't converted as many people as...
Not necessarily, but it can be the
They
case
may not
also.
have, but
Yeah.
that's...
It is the case in some places, for sure.
Even if it
no
is
question.
so, at least some people get...
There's no harm becoming Christian. There's no harm becoming
Yeah.
Monks in power in the Christian context are
Yeah.
exploiting the nuns.
Oh, yeah.
And those are all coming out now.
Yeah.
And another thing is, Christianity has been in India for a longer time
Then Buddhism.
than Buddhism. Yeah. I'm talking of neo-Buddhism.
Christianity.
Or now, the Buddhist movement which has started after the Dalai Lama moved to India.
Yeah, that's different, yeah.
Because before that, I think more or less Buddhism was extinct here.
Yeah.
While the Christians from 17th century, or at least 18th, have been around.
Yeah.
And also they give a lot of incentives for people who convert.
Yeah.
And that becomes very attractive for people who do not have basic comforts.
Right.
And because I have a lady now who comes and spends the night at my place, and she told me I was a Hindu 4 years back, and now I'm a Catholic. I said, what was the reason for your becoming a Catholic? She says, what I pray for comes true. So she gets it.
Right.
I didn't want to probe more further because, because because she has her own problems. She has a disabled husband.
Nice.
So she
Yeah.
needs money, and she works in some diagnostic center as a housekeeping staff. Another woman also had earlier got treatment, because this woman is at a different level. She said, oh, my husband was very ill, and the pastor said he doesn't need prayer, he doesn't need the surgery. And he did, and so we got converted.
I see.
So, I mean,
Yeah, there's all kinds of stories, no? People have all kinds of different reasons for changing religion.
and there is a, particularly in Bangalore, I find there's a lot of conversion.
Is it? Okay. Anyway, we don't want to have a whole discussion about conversion here. I said we don't want to have a whole discussion about conversion particularly, but it just arose from Abin's question about why the Buddhists talk so much about helping, but then they don't do anything actually. Which is, yeah, it's true, it's a bit of an issue. But yeah, it's because looking at the difference between the different ways of helping, Buddhists traditionally consider benefiting the mind of the individuals more important, because it's the mind that goes on from life to life. Like even if you have food and medicine and education and things, if you don't have Dharma education, Dharma wisdom, then you'll just be creating more causes for suffering and samsara. But it's true that when you say that if people don't have enough to eat, if they don't have like medical care, they don't have basic education, then how can they be interested in these more higher ephemeral things like spiritual path? It's unrealistic to expect, and that's also true. So yeah, you need both. But yeah, it's a matter of, there's also a danger, because we can all see, to generate realizations on the path, not to mention high levels of realization, it's incredibly difficult to do. So to generate the level of realization of like Lama Zopa Rinpoche or His Holiness Dalai Lama, people we can, to speak of people we can actually see, or like the kind of the intelligence like Geshe Dorje Gamdo you can see, it just manifests when he talks. It's this incredible knowledge and experience of the Dharma. That's something, it requires like devotion of all your time and energy over lifetimes, not just one lifetime. So then traditionally from the time of Shakyamuni Buddha, the community of monks and nuns are a community of people who are devoting all their time and energy to trying to meditate on the path, study and meditate on the path to generate these actual realizations like the Buddha and Shariputra, Moggallana, and Nagarjuna and Shantideva, the kind of level of realization that they actually developed. So to even produce a few individuals each generation who have real significant level of realization that they can confidently guide others on the whole path is incredibly difficult. It requires the input of thousands of individuals trying, and that whole community trying together to practice, to study and practice the path. And then out of that, each generation, you just get a handful of people who actually have realizations. So then if you take the energy of that community and then put it into like giving elementary education to the lay people, or giving medical care to a whole bunch of people, it's like you dissipate that precious energy that could be put into generating realizations on the spiritual path. Not that they're contradictory, not that they can't go together, because definitely spiritual practice can go together with that kind of service, in hospitals and schools and stuff. But it's kind of a matter of time and energy. Like if I'm running a clinic, as the monasteries do actually, they have clinics that serve the villagers. There's free medical care at the monasteries or clinics. But if I'm a monk who's, you can look at the difference between the monks who just debate, they go to debate and they study the path, and the monks who serve in the clinic. You can't do both. It's just not reasonable, because the monks who serve in the clinic, they need a certain set of skills. They need to know how to use the X-ray machine, they need to know how to take blood samples, they need to know which medicines to give and how to clean a wound, and they need to be there every day doing that, because otherwise, because someone who knows how to do that has to be there doing it. So then they don't have time to study or do other practice. Service is a practice, but they don't have time to really generate good concentration or know how to meditate on emptiness or generate, basically they do, but in depth, in detail, to get the kind of wisdom that like a Larampa Geshe has, they cannot do that. And then vice versa, the one who's really studying like all of the sutras and tantras and really knows thoroughly in detail and accurately the Buddhist path, they can't also know how to teach, a classroom full of kids or know how to take care of people with different kinds of sicknesses. So it becomes a matter of choosing what to do and what to emphasize. Like one person can't do everything, and as a community, they choose more to focus on studying and practicing and trying to generate the realizations that the Buddha taught, right? But definitely there are individuals who they're not really inclined to do that traditional sort of study and practice, Buddhist study and practice. And then for them it's great to have opportunity to serve the community, the lay community, by providing medicine, education, and so forth. So that's something that's changing in the kind of Buddhist world now.
Yeah, but it also gives us an opportunity, since we have studied, since we know the path of a Bodhisattva is what we have to follow. Then generating bodhicitta certainly needs a certain kind of external events to take place that will help the Bodhisattva on this path of being generous, of spending a bit of time and helping. Everybody, as you yourself pointed out, as everybody is not inclined to listen to wisdom. They don't want to hear words of wisdom. They would rather, hey, no, please, don't give me that. Don't give me all that. You keep to yourself. I personally have heard this so many times. When I've been able to identify the cause of someone's problem, but he does not want the solution. He doesn't want to address the cause of his problem. You see, this happens so many times.
Yes.
So, what is the person on the path of a bodhisattva in order to develop bodhicitta? Then certainly we have to do certain activities beyond just giving dharma. Of course, that's the ultimate. Dharma teaching is the ultimate generosity, ultimate act of generosity. But other than that,
not really. Actually, there's basically three kind of paths. No, either meditation, spending time in solitary meditation, generating realizations in your mind stream is actually the ultimate kind of offering, because then you can teach out of your realization. There's generating meditation or teaching or service. No, there's those three.
You say or service. You don't say
or service.
You don't say and service.
Well, it can be. I mean, one person can do all three, right? But generally, as the main focus for a Dharma practitioner, there's either the main focus is generally one of those three.
And the main focus of a bodhisattva?
Can be any of those three. No? That's what I'm saying.
Any of those three?
Yeah.
It cannot be the one that is the desire to achieve those realizations through the path of generosity, through the path of the altruistic path. The realizations.
Whatever the Bodhisattva's path is, always altruistic. I mean, because they have bodhicitta, that's the ultimate altruism. Altruistic motivation. But I'm saying that the way that motivation is expressed, what they do, because that's what you're talking about. You have to actually do something. I could say, well, yeah, you have to actually do something. You can do different things. You can mainly meditate to generate realizations, or you can teach the Dharma, or you can also do service. Like work in a hospice, or work in a hospital, or something like that, or teach, or practice medicine. There's so many ways to offer service. And you don't have to do any one of those things, but it's true, you have to focus on one. Make one the main thing. And there's no big contradiction. I don't see what the hang-up is.
You don't see the contradiction.
No, I think people only see the effects of physical acts done more visibly, like it's seen and experienced by more people. But the effect of teaching and meditation are not as visibly seen. So.
True, yeah. It's more difficult to appreciate.
Yeah, that's because it happens on a more subtle level where they're not able to...
Yeah, I mean, look at examples. You have to look at real life examples. Like, look at Lama Zopa Rinpoche. What is he? He doesn't like give anybody medicine or, open schools and stuff, but he travels around teaching, and then because of that he inspires so many people. There's so many schools and clinics and, stuff and like animal care and hospice that have all been started or being run by people who've been inspired by his example, but they're not inclined to do meditation, they're not inclined to study Dharma and teach, they're inclined to do service. So that's what they do. But that all comes about in dependence upon this one person having spent in his last life, he spent his life in a cave meditating for most of his life. Then this life, he spends his life going around teaching. But his teaching has such a powerful impact on people. Why? Because he has generated realizations in his mind stream. How did he generate realizations? Because in his past life, he spent his entire life meditating in a cave up in the Himalayas. So that's why you have to think from life to life to life. You know?
I think we also have our own propensities could be different. Like doing service could be difficult for some people because they get frustrated in certain situations.
Yeah, because they easily get angry at other people. So it's better
it is counterproductive for them, so they prefer to do other things.
True, yeah. And some people, like, they're just really good at, like, studying, memorizing, you know, reading, very good concentration, but they don't have much street smarts. They don't really know how to deal with people very well. So then service not really going to happen very well for them. There's all different kind of paths now. All right, let's dedicate now. We're out of time. Let's dedicate with this prayer on page 102, the final Namra dedication prayer. Page 102. The final Namra dedication prayer. So think of all the merit we've created together with having a positive motivation from the very beginning, at 10:15 this morning, and listening to Dharma teaching, making prayers, contemplating on enthusiasm and Dharma practice and obstacles to Dharma practice, and progressively, increasing our ability to do more and more and more to work for the welfare, work for our own well-being, well-being of others, and then meditating. So rejoice. Think what good effort we've made now and all the good things we've done in our whole life, in countless past lives. So all this merit, and then we can rejoice in all the merit created by our holy beings everywhere, by people who have developed their positive qualities in their mind to an exceptional degree everywhere. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and beings in every spiritual tradition who generate exceptional love, compassion, wisdom. Rejoice, think how wonderful it is. And then think of all the good things ordinary people do everywhere. Teachers and parents and doctors and nurses and so forth. Look how excellent it is people do things to help one another, to benefit others, selflessly. So all this merit gathered together, and we dedicate especially for the flourishing of the Buddha Dharma in every spiritual tradition that shows a true path to freedom from suffering and lasting happiness, ultimate happiness. And we dedicate especially for those exceptional role models and teachers who show us the way, such as His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the spiritual director of the center, Geshe Dorje Damdula, Geshe Losang Delek, and all other spiritual teachers that have long and stable lives, and may all their holy intentions be immediately fulfilled. May we have a pure view, not seeing faults, but only seeing the positive qualities. And then in general, for all sentient beings, may they be free from hunger, thirst, famine, natural disasters, disease, conflict, abuse, oppression, loneliness, depression, relationship problems, and so forth. In short, may all human beings, all animals may they be free from being slaughtered. May human beings quickly stop destroying the planet by polluting it with carbon dioxide, methane, and so forth. May reverse global warming quickly. And make the planet a place, a perfectly enjoyable place for all sentient beings to live and dwell long into the future, with all the conditions to achieve liberation and enlightenment. especially for anyone who's sick, who's related to the center in any way, such as Miriam, April's mother. May they immediately be healed. Excellent health. When their time comes to die, may they die in peace, with ease, with joyful mind. And all those who have recently died, may they quickly take a precious human rebirth and meet all the best conditions for continued practice the spiritual path most suited to their disposition. And especially may this center flourish, continue to flourish, and have ample financial support and volunteers, and may everyone who is related to the center work harmoniously together and be able to offer the Buddha's teachings to many, many sentient beings in Bangalore and beyond. Especially may the CKSL be able to quickly have its own premises soon, the property that they own, so can have more expanded facilities. And then any other intentions you have, bring them to mind. Any other prayers you'd like to make, bring them to mind. So may all those your virtuous prayers be fulfilled. So then we'll dedicate with this the Lama dedication prayer. From my two collections, vast is space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose mind's wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives of Jushu. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please the Buddhas by my practice, using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion. May I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings, with the points of the path as I have discerned. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time, with my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. May I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time. By even this graded path to enlightenment completed, due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their children, may all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lifetimes from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may they always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Okay, so we'll conclude there today. Thank you all for your attention, your participation.
Thank you very much.
And I hope we meet again